12 m. It's December 7th. I just want to do a roll members, and I'm going to say in advance, sorry if I missed everybody. Richard Allman, Mariella Graham.
Your audio is breaking up, Debbie. Your audio is breaking up. It's almost impossible to understand you at the moment.
All right. No, I'm just having internet patchiness. Can people hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yep.
No longer.
She's frozen. She has the spinning thing. It's on my iPad. Look at that. Now she's making strange, unearthly noises.
It's the
I have suggested that the board get additional copies of Zoom so we don't have to deal with this nonsense.
One more license would do it, and we could all be at peace and go to all the meetings. Nice.
Exactly. So let's rattle somebody's cage. This is ridiculous. It's our time is too important to deal with these glitches that we should not have to deal with when we just get another license.
Not hearing anything.
Debbie, you're breaking up. You might have to connect just via audio if that's not happening. Maybe dial in.
Frozen again.
However, is to begin.
We can't hear you. We have heard nothing you said.
Every WebEx meeting is like this.
That's
that
why
I've been
we
on.
need,
It's crazy.
right, and there's no excuse for this.
I'm gonna
We have
just,
to
I'm gonna see if
demand.
it makes any difference to my router, and see if that makes a
That
difference.
might make a huge difference. Yes, sit on top of it.
Allman, who I'll hand off to, has better luck. Is this any better now?
Much better.
All right, so blame that on me and concrete walls. So what I would say is we're going to start off, and I'm sorry to repeat myself for those that were able to hear. Richard Allman is going to lead us in a conversation about Bennett Avenue and renaming. While the conversations about Bennett Park are further along, Richard has sort of suggested we have kind of an earlier conversation to just sort of examine, could there not be a parallel conversation about streets? So it's sort of more of an early conversation. Our other agenda item relates to Amber Charter School and their expansion into Inwood. That presentation is not likely to start before 8 p.m. because they are currently presenting at the Youth and Education Committee, which is tonight. We're doing at the same time. So hopefully they'll have wrapped up. It's their first agenda item, and they'll have wrapped up by 8 p.m. Meaning, what I'd like to do in between those two items is cover any sort of updates on old business, et cetera, and I'll provide them at that time. So Richard Allman, if you're able to hear me, I'm hoping people can now. If you want to just take over now and take us through the conversation about Bennett Avenue and naming, renaming, co-naming, etc.
I will do that. Let me just put. Thanks, Debbie. Let me do a little background on where this issue has come from. 2 or 3 months ago, it came to the attention of a number of people I know that the fire department was renaming a long-standing award that had been given in the fire department's name and was named the James Gordon Bennett Award. It's an article in the New York Times explaining why that happened, what it had to do with how Mr. Bennett had used the platform he had to promote racist ideas. He's a newspaper publisher, and it was particularly at the time of the Civil War. For people to take a look at now or later, I just put a link to that article in the chat. Discussion has happened in a number of places, and we have 2 things named after James Gordon Bennett in the neighborhood: Bennett Park and Bennett Avenue. A discussion has been going on at the Parks Committee this past month, and a little before that, even at the CB12's executive committee, over whether this was an appropriate thing to do. At last month's Parks Committee, there was a lot of interest in that. Just feeling that would best reflect our values to pose that, to go forward with that. I come tonight, or I guess I'm here as a member, just to raise this as a starter issue with the Transportation Committee over whether we would want to look at proposing a renaming of Bennett Avenue. And I think the issue of renaming a street is a bit different than the issue of renaming a park, simply because it impacts more people, our accounts, our bills, everything, organizations and their identity in ways that may be a little bit different from a park. I think that's one of the things that might be part of this discussion. I don't know whether Lyle Blackwood from DOT is prepared or not to speak to that. We certainly would want to hear what DOT had to say about street renamings and how those issues are approached. Street renamings, co-namings, etc. I think those are the things that would be worth considering in this discussion. I personally come to this discussion without as strong a position as I came to the parks discussion. And I think it's time to open up this discussion to see what other thoughts there are over whether we might want to consider a proposal on the renaming or co-naming of Bennett Avenue.
Thanks, Richard. So first, I'm going to ask if anybody from the committee, just if you want to raise the hand, if anybody has any feedback on this. I will say we don't know for sure, and Lyle should probably pipe in here, but I was sort of curious to know, are things like in Adam Clayton Powell Jr. Boulevard or Avenue of the Americas, et cetera, are those considered from the DOT standpoint? Are those considered renamings or co-namings? I haven't gotten confirmation, but I spoke to Jennifer today, and she said she thought those actually existed as co-namings, obviously in a more turbocharged way than when we do a street corner. And I guess just my input is just that I'd like to kind of see how this develops on the park side. And then maybe talk about it in sort of that next step of detail about, do we want to do anything or not? But again, do I have anybody from the committee? If you want, just
Yes,
actually,
I do have some information. I'm a former postal worker.
Oh, thanks, Jay.
And to the best of my knowledge, 7th Avenue and 8th Avenue and Lenox Avenue get you to the same address as at Malcolm X Boulevard, etc. Either address gets the mail to the address, and this has been going on for decades with the 3 major avenues in Harlem. I don't know if 6th Avenue gets you to Lenox and Malcolm X, which it originally was at all, but to the best of my knowledge, both addresses reach the apartment. And I have a friend who lives on Malcolm X Boulevard, and she gets mail under both addresses. So that's continuing to the best of my knowledge.
That's right. That's right. Whereas if you picked any of the other kind of co-namings that we're more traditionally involved in, their mail would not come to that address if one used that alternative. So,
Jay brings up an interesting point because there are postal implications. So you can't just change the name of the street because then the people who and you know the people who write to you, for example, need a difference. So that's part of the complication. I think consequently, I would like us to now hear from Lyle if he's available, and since he probably understands these technicalities better than we do.
All right, actually, to be honest, I know.
sorry, Lyle, we can't hear you.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I was mentioning just saying I'm not really sure as to the procedure as far as what the request is. That's I'm gonna have to do some research on my own about that. As far as traditional coding though, usually those tend to go through the council for approval. I'm not sure if that would be the case in this instance, but I can definitely do some research. I'm pretty curious to see what can be done. Is the idea to just change the name from Bennett Avenue completely to a different name, or is it a shared street like it would be, say, 7th Avenue / Howard and so forth?
My thought is that when we talk about renaming or co-naming, however the parlance, that it would mean in this case similar to 7th Avenue, that both would still be operative in terms of mail, because I don't think anybody sees it as an option to sort of not to have somebody not be able to receive mail at the address that they've always been able to receive mail at.
Okay. Yeah, I can definitely do some research to see what the procedure is, and I can get back to you. Yeah, it's definitely something I can look at.
Okay. Do we have anybody else from CB? Edith, did you have something?
Yeah. Is there a proposed name?
No. I mean, and again, this isn't as far along. I think there's been a lot of ideas put forth on the park side, so I think that'll be interesting tomorrow. I think there are, people have been generating ideas and suggesting things, and I think a lot of that'll flesh out, but not for the street. I mean, this is much more preliminary, obviously.
A little more on that, if I may. When Parks Committee had its discussion last month, the representatives from the Parks Department said, if you're going to propose that this park be renamed, please make a suggestion with that. I think that's probably part of what we all, Lyle, if you would, just tell us a little more about the Department of Transportation's procedures, because we've gone a bit further at parks, partly because the Parks Department said, we'd like you to do this. So, I mean, it's an agency procedural question also.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, this is the first I've as far as the question in regards to the funding of the entire street, not just a corner. But we do have a borough engineering, that's a division within DOT that handles signage. They might have a few ideas as to what the process is. I'm not sure if it would be solely a DOT decision. I think City Hall possibly. But those are all questions we can try to get answers to. I think it's
Thank you.
it will also be good.
Richard, I believe what you said was about an interest in changing the name, not putting up two signs on the street, but removing Bennett from the name of the avenue. Is that
No.
right?
No, I think my introduction was renaming or co-naming, and the phrase shared naming has been introduced in this conversation. I think the question here is what's the best way to move on the values we bring to this discussion? And I don't think there's a clear answer at this point. That's why we should be talking about it.
Yeah, I would say as far as from I was just going to say from a DOT perspective, it probably might help if there was a name that you would have in consideration to change it to. That might get the ball rolling on our side if if any talks progress. That might be a good idea.
Well, I think there's a more basic issue. If we are unhappy with the behavior of Mr. Bennett, we don't want his name associated with the street anymore. Just like you don't want, well, again, I'll just leave it at that. I mean, the other thing I just thought of, by the way, maybe we should look at this too, because again, it's difficult to change the name, but maybe as they are thinking of doing with some monuments, for example, in the South, rather than destroying them, they wish to put an additional marker there explaining the context. So it could be maybe Bennett Avenue, with asterisk or, something like that, so that people would know that this is the name. And see, that may sort of be true with the park too, because if Bennett donated the park to the city, he, however much of a terrible person he was, actually donated the park to the city. So that's another complication, I would think, in the case of the park. But anyway, that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
If I may, I like that sensibility, but I think that's a lot easier to do with a park or a monument when things are consistently at eye level. Street signs are up above, and it's a little harder to do explanation with in context. Not impossible, but more difficult.
Well, maybe we could have this symbol sort of like they do with, flaky baseball scores, Bennett Asterisk Avenue, and people go, what's with the asterisk? Oh, he was in favor of slavery. Don't know.
Okay.
And I suggest it sounds to me like we're preparing for a discussion either next month or in the next couple of months. There's a list of tasks or information here. I think the one other that we all ought to try to do is to find a way to connect with people who live or run organizations on Bennett and do our best to see that they're at least some part of this discussion.
May I say something?
Sorry. Go ahead.
So what I have noticed, and perhaps DOT can come back with what choices we have that have worked in other places, such as Adam Clayton Powell, such as, Martin Luther King Avenue, which is now Lenox. And what I have seen happen down there, since our district office is actually on Adam Clayton Powell, which is 7th Avenue, the signs do not say 7th Avenue, the signs say Adam Clayton Powell. And what seems to be happening, although as Jay mentioned before, mail still goes where it needs to go, even if on the envelope you say 7th Avenue instead of Adam Clayton Powell. As people move and as children come up, there are people who no longer recognize that avenue as 7th Avenue. So there has been, I guess you could say, a grace period in which that transition happens. But I think perhaps DOT would be more prepared with examples of where this has happened. I don't think that we should keep this person's name. I think we should phase it out if it's possible to do so, which I think it is. It's just a matter of time. And just as, you know, it's been there a long time, it'll take a little bit longer for it to fade out completely. But I do believe that, you know, and yes, there should be a plaque there. Like, yes, this used to be named after a racist, but then we learned better. So perhaps there's something that we can do in that way.
I have a question.
Yeah,
I'm raising my hand.
Hello.
Raising my hand.
Yeah, Gerard has hand up, and then we'll have Angel Vasquez.
I was thinking, you know, again, context is a great thing to have. So maybe with all the technology that's being deployed, and it's going to be deployed in things like Google Maps, I know that there are certain things when you call them up on Google, or if you're at cultural institutions, you know, there's actually little notations. It could be a paragraph, it could be 3 lines. You know, I mean, there's a story here to tell, whether, you know, that can be instructive and informative, and to not tell it at all really doesn't favor moving forward. So I would say let's advocate and bring in context, and if technology can make that happen, certainly as we move forward, why not? I mean, you can take any street you want, and wherever it lives technologically, and Maps, Google Maps, these things, put that writing in there that provides context and tells the story. And we need to hear these stories. We can't just, you know, close our eyes, and, you know, there's so much to learn, or not. This is an opportunity for future people to get the full story and understanding. That's my thought on it. Technology might help here.
Angel? So
You're muted.
I was just going to echo some of the sentiments shared by the previous speaker. And I do agree that maybe some type of plaque that explains everything that happens could be placed like at the park. But I would rather go down the path in terms of renaming the street, not trying to co-name the street. I know that there's probably some documents or some moment in history where it's happened. I would love to see how that's come about. But if I agree, we need to tell the full story, but that can be done where, like, perhaps the current park is, that tells even the story of how the street got renamed. But I would rather go down the path of just simply renaming the street, not co-naming it. That's where I am.
Sorry, this is Debbie. I was muted before, and thank you. I think this is all good input. And what I was saying is, you know, Gerard's point was very well stated, and I just wanted people to know that I think Parks, Liz and the Parks Committee are very focused on that aspect of that context, and that I think we can presume that whatever happens on the park side will be robust, and that on the street side, we'll have that to also reference. So even though we have a more limited way to go about providing that context, we're not in it alone. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'm concerned about transit. In that, as we come down Broadway on a bus, it announces the corner of Bennett and Broadway. I identify myself to Access-a-Ride as living on 186th Street between Bennett and Overlook. And the fact that we willy-nilly rename buildings something plaza, an avenue, an address that they are not on, it's problematic. And I'm a little concerned about the ease in which we are glibly discussing changing a street name. And this really needs to be a community discussion, not a traffic and transportation discussion. It needs a public hearing. It should be something that everyone on Bennett Avenue, which relatively is a short avenue, but it should be a topic of community conversation.
Edith, thank you for that. I think that point is very well taken. And Richard, I think in sort of being the holder of the plan, I think we should take Edith's suggestion that if we do decide to take the next step, that it doesn't, that we situate it with the whole community or at the board level and not sort of keep it as close as we might, in a normal co-naming through traffic and transportation.
That's pretty comfortable to do since that was part of the introduction to this discussion and cognizance. And so, sure.
Well, thank you. Thank you for keeping an eye on that. I'm sorry, in the earlier part, I was dealing with my technical difficulties, so I'm sorry that I didn't capture that. Anyone, do we have somebody on the phone, 9175 something, that wanted to say something? Okay. All right. So, Richard, you're comfortable with sort of what the next steps will be?
I think what we've got coming out of this is all of us giving some thought to just best course forward for people who have had particular proposals around technology, around plaques, anything that can be done to gather more information in the next month or two is a positive for that discussion. Lyle is going to do some background at DOT. I'm glad to do some contacts along Bennett and at least make sure that people down there are brought into the discussion, and would encourage Edith or anyone else who wants to be part of that outreach. If you can amplify it, great.
All right. Richard, thanks for taking the lead on this.
Sure.
So I want to go through a few updates now. Again, we're on the sort of flipped order of how we usually are doing things. And hopefully Amber Charter will, as I said, join us around 8. So first, City Bike. If people may remember, the second half of CB12, we're awaiting. We thought early spring 2021. So DOT has contacted us about what that process will be. And what that process will be is they will actually be at our January meeting. So that is the opportunity for all of us to see a draft of what they're thinking for the rest of Manhattan above 184th Street. And like last time, we will, they'll sort of present what they've come up with. We will have an opportunity, obviously, people can give feedback at that meeting, but that will kick off a 1-month process for anybody and everybody to provide feedback to DOT. And once again, the idea would be that we would do as we did last time, that for CB12, we'll consolidate board member comments in sort of one piece, so that way DOT has, again, anybody can speak to them directly. We'll have our meeting notes, and we'll also have a document that I'll put together that rolls up any feedback that we get from community board members. So I had been mistaken on an aspect of what the process would be, in that I thought that I understood that there were sort of two phases that we would sort of replicate the entire process, meaning the public workshop, et cetera. But they actually, for each community board, they do one round of that, the workshop, that moment where we could push pins in the interactive map. But that's a one-time step. And then, so this will be kind of what we saw, if people remember, where we were presented with a draft and we had the opportunity to provide feedback. But because we have the benefit of it being December 7th, and we have a month to go to that first meeting, I would just encourage everybody to, do as much outreach as they can to people that have something to say about this, so that we can have, great attendance and great feedback. And again, also give people the instructions when the time comes of how they can provide that feedback directly if they wish. So that's City Bank. Second, and I'm kind of leaving the bigger thing for last, I guess. If people remember, I don't know if it was I think it was our October meeting, but it's possible it was our November. So we had talked about how the long work had concluded pretty much at Nagel and Hillside Broadway, Bennett, that intersection, and that it seemed like there were some problems. And at the time there was a backup up Broadway during our meeting, meaning well past rush hour. And we've also we've heard from like a community member who said, there's also some issues with the way, like the safety of some of the crossing signal, et cetera. So I just want to say, like, to Lyle in particular, that we'll still be interested to understand from DOT how, like what you do, like the work got done, but then sort of what's the look back process to make sure it's doing what it was intended to do and not having unintended consequences. I mean, Lyle, have you heard anything, or do you have any feedback on that point?
I don't have any feedback as far as the specific process. I know that, DOT is able to conduct a signal timing study, at the request, of the community board or resident. So, we will take a look at the intersection to see what can be done. I don't know as to the specifics of the process. Bar Signals Division, I can reach out to them to see if they give us some more information. But if it is warranted that the signals around there do need to be changed, so long as, from a safety perspective, there wouldn't be any negatives, it's something that we can definitely consider.
I mean, I guess sort of my bigger point, to sort of put a finer point on it, is, community boards resolve on street changes like this that were designed to improve traffic flow or pedestrian safety or all of the above. This one was a very long project. It's a very complicated intersection. So I'm just trying to understand, sort of both generally and specifically, when the paint dries and you guys wrap up and go on to the next project, who looks and how does it happen to make sure that everything achieved its objectives? So let's, if I didn't send you, what we had gotten from a resident, I will do so, but it's not just the safety issue. It's also there was that traffic backup. It might or might not have related to the changes, but it seems like it would make sense that when we do these things, that then you look to see if they worked. So we would like to understand sort of what data is collected and how you show, yeah, we tried to achieve this and we did or we didn't. And so
But is that officially done?
Well, that's the other question, because Con Ed was still over there, but that wasn't sort of part of that project. As I understood it, the base project was done.
What's happening on Broadway in the bus stop? What's happening with the fact you can't cross the street? What's happening with the fact that the mail trucks are all still throughout the entire intersection, obstructing sight lines. This has not changed at all. It's gotten worse.
Really?
You can't cross from the north side of Bennett across Broadway with any safety.
Okay. So, Lyle, let's, can we plan at the January meeting? We'll follow up on this again, and if you can get specifics, because then, if, you know, Edith is right there. And so she's saying the same thing that, you know, we're hearing in a separate place, like, let's understand that was an awfully complicated situation to not have got, you know, it needs to be right.
I mean, you cannot proceed north on Broadway and then cross over Nagel and that little, you know, little shoulder thing to continue proceeding north on Broadway. I don't think that's finished. I'm sorry. Unless you want to just say, we're closing these sides of the intersection.
Yeah, I'm not
6th
sure.
Avenue.
Sorry, yeah, I'm not sure if the project is done. I know it's a DDC-led project. I think the last update I heard, I think that they were some finishing touches they were going to put onto the project, and it was going to be wrapped up early next year. I'm not sure if they're the schedule or what's left for them to do. So I can check in the DDC also to see where they stand on that. But yeah, we can definitely take a look at this. We could definitely take a look at the signal timing, and you know, I can get some more information on the process, and I'll see if I can have it in time for January's meeting.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, and the next thing is, and I'm gonna, Bruce, get ready because I'm gonna call on you. Is as people may remember, the implementation, on the subject of implementation at 157th Riverside Drive in the 157th and 158th area has happened. The speeds by which people are coming off Riverside Drive have certainly improved. However, a concrete median kind of across from 800 Riverside Drive, when everybody, you know, it was actually implemented, we realized you couldn't pull over and unload. You couldn't double park without stopping Riverside Drive completely. A loading zone, a no standing zone was implemented on Friday and Saturday. And so far, people are not realizing it's a no standing zone. And so as of right now, as far as I know, thanks to Bruce's real-time data, people are parked there. But the other thing that is true is that the way it's signed, and I actually didn't know this, maybe other people did, is that there's a red no standing zone sign there now. But so it shows you where it sort of starts, so to speak. But the other end of it is not marked by another red sign that indicates here's the end of the no standing zone. Apparently, in the world of DOT, what you look for is the next sign, like that speaks about parking regulations. So the next sign is a, what do you call it? Is a like a regular, like alternate side sign, you know?
ASP, alternate street parking sign.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's only been a number of hours. Unfortunately, and I think any of us with cars have had this experience, sometimes we need to learn the hard way by getting a ticket when there's been a change, which certainly happened, which we have seen before happen, so that the people that get caught in that first few days are quite upset because they don't know that a new sign went into place. So, so I think we'll need to follow up to make sure that that traffic enforcement knows about the new change. But Bruce has been at the, Bruce has been sort of he's been the point of contact for many of the residents in that area and has done an amazing job over the past month of receiving the feedback and keeping things moving and getting questions answered and feeding information back. And so thank you, Bruce. Is there anything you want to add, say?
Well, one thing is that there's a tree that's blocking this new no standing sign from really being seen clearly. And at some point, I would like to go back to the whole process of how this all started and how it was, we approved a plan that was a PowerPoint, and then all of a sudden it became reality, and then we weren't happy with the reality for one part of the project, which just so happened to be right in front of my building, where we have elderly, people with disabilities, trucks coming and going, blah, 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 blah. And I feel like we personally didn't do a great job of notifying my building, because I had no notice that it was going to happen. My understanding was going to happen in the spring. Why all of a sudden did it happen so quickly? And then, we were in touch with Kimberly Rancourt, who was the special projects manager, who would explain things to us. Why? Oh, well, you said it was going to be 27 feet. Well, no, it's 21 feet. Well, that's not enough for 3 cars. Well, that's the way it goes. And she did a good job of explaining things, but it's like, tough, that's the way it's going to be. When we could have stopped it fairly early on before they started cutting, when they were drawing lines in the street, but there was no procedure for doing that. It was like on autopilot. And now we have this no standing zone, which, what else can we do to enforce that? I don't know. Do we get do we call the traffic police every day and have somebody come by? Do we paint the curb yellow? Do we put up some cones? It's a real problem. And ironically, it's a real problem just for our building. Nobody else in the whole block from 155 to 158, right? It was really totally unnecessary that we had to have that median in front of our building. The rest of the project is great. People love it. They compliment DOT, they compliment CB12. But so, like Debbie just said, when the paint dries, what's it going to look like down the road? Thank you. I'm done.
Sorry, I had muted myself. Bruce, I would say, I do think that the no standing zone will, we need to, it will be in better effect. I think it needs a little time for people to absorb, and hopefully we'll get some benefits from that.
Okay. I'm new at this.
No, I take your point. I'm just saying, I have seen this. We had this on Fort Washington where something got installed and then people got caught, ensnared in it for like a couple of, business days, and then it sorted out. But we should it's a 35-foot zone, I believe. So once it is more operative, meaning people are not parking there,
it's 2 spots. It's 2 spots.
It'll be good to get some
3.
feedback if it needs to be longer, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. All right.
All right.
Thank you.
And happily, while I can't believe I can finally say this, there are lights on Cabrini. That took a long time. There was a mugging. There was a little bit of a car situation, somebody losing some chunk of their car. But they're up. There's light, and there's also trees and tree boxes. So that's exciting. And I guess I know we have Allegra Legrand in the chat, wanted to bring up a new business item, and Allegra, let's connect over the next week, because that is something actually I wanted to ask you about as well. So let's connect offline. I will get to you, or you know how to get to me. And I think I'm going to give us like a 5-minute break and then have us come back. But if, does anybody from the committee have anything that they wanted to raise or ask about in terms of old business that I might have neglected?
Debbie, I think just bringing back up the lighting on, and I always get these highways confused, but it was the lighting on the Harlem River Drive. Just any status update on that?
Oh, right. Right.
Yep. If there's anything.
Right. Thank you. So I guess two things. One, Lyle, do you have any update? As you know, one of our community board colleagues has highlighted this, and she uses the roadway a lot in the evening, but also Chanel, not to drag you into this, but this is really a district service cabinet meeting, all the more so because it actually involves Con Ed and DOT and possibly the park, but maybe not. So I'm just wondering, Chanel, if you can help me get that on Ebenezer's like running list for the district service cabinet, because this isn't really, this is like a perfect thing for them because it's cross agency. But Lyle, do you know anything?
I don't know anything, but Ebenezer comes back tomorrow, so I'll bring that up to him.
Okay.
Yeah.
And and just if you could just make sure it gets on his list for the next DSC, that would be good. Thank you. Lyle, do you have any updates? So from that last one was quite some time ago.
Yeah, no updates as of now, but now that you put it back on my radar, I'll see if I can get some answers for you.
Okay.
Were we gonna do roll call?
For what?
No, I thought we were gonna start roll call before, but I don't think we did.
We're not voting on anything.
Oh, before someone said we were gonna do roll call and we never did it. We can do it later.
Could I raise an issue? It's Edith. I'm really concerned about St. Nicholas Avenue from 165th to 168th. And the situation of trying to cross St. Nicholas on the north side of 167th. If you're trying to cross St. Nicholas, say you're running for the bus, and vehicles are coming across 167 and making the right turn, and the buses are sticking far enough back to be covering the crosswalk and the walk signal. And the problem seems to be when there's an M3 laying over at the 168th Street end. And then so you have the 3, the 7, and the 100 proceeding up St. Nicholas to the bus stop. And it creates a bit of a problem. Additionally, people backing into parking spaces on the Broadway side of St. Nicholas are really pretty bad at that. And it creates a lot of traffic issues right there, particularly from 167 to 168.
So Edith, so we're talking about the stretch once again, something that this board did a resolution on, that changed St. Nicholas to one direction in that stretch. And added parking on that stretch of St. Nicholas as well, but it's angled parking. So that's what you're referring to. So now people are coming.
Back in angle parking. That's the problem.
Right.
So you're on St. Nicholas, you have to stop and back up into the
Right.
parking.
Right. Okay. So this is, and I see we have Amber Charter here, so we're going to move to that in a moment. But then, so Edith, thank you for, again, being the eyes on the ground for the feedback. So Lyle, this is just another example, something that was implemented and just understanding when there's sometimes like potential, you know, how are we looking at it, making sure it's working in the way we want it to work and all of that. So maybe we can connect on that as well and just, you know, sort of, I think we've talked about 3 projects where you have the same sort of questions. Richard Allman. Oh, unmute, Richard.
Before we leave this issue, I'd like to see and I think you pointed towards part of it, an overview of what's happening with at street buses. I think there are a couple of additional problems. Edith mentioned in part what the M3 layover at the front end does. Perhaps there's a better place for him, a more appropriate place for that layover. It creates some boarding problems as well as everything else. And I think there are some reasonable questions about how the M2 comes through that intersection. And I think we would do well to do a joint review, I think, with DOT and with MTA because there's some overlapping issues there.
That's a good suggestion. Let's, I mean, I haven't done a walkthrough, you know, formally with DOT on any of these. And I think they all merit it. So thank you for that suggestion. And Lyle, we can do that sort of thing. Can you work with me on setting that up?
Yeah, we can have a conversation offline and we can talk further.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. With that, welcome Team Amber Charter. I appreciate you being here and Youth and Education and telling us about plans and the school and all of that. I will preface this by saying we weren't always this sensitive to school buildings and how they were occupied until we had a somewhat disastrous situation with Success Academy in Washington Heights, that just the location, the sort of combination of the census of the school and the location and the particular idiosyncrasies of the location, you know, just kind of blew up the area. So we now have, you know, always want to try to understand as best we can, you know, the plan for the area and what we can expect and head off, you know, where we can if we think there might be an issue. I want to thank Mariella Graham, one of our newer committee members, who really took the initiative with this issue and making us aware, along with Dave Tom from the community. So what I'd like to do is hand this over to Amber Charter team, and then to present, and then I'm going to ask Dave Tom from Inwood Owners to just take a couple of minutes and sort of share with people what he has shared with us about the area as well. And then I guess, yeah. And then I think I would like to hold questions till after Dave, but let's just see where, if people have very specific things for Amber as we're going, then we'll do that. But, and then whoever starts with Amber, I don't know if that's gonna be, just if you could introduce your whole team, because it looks like we've got quite a few of you. Hi. Sorry, I'm gonna start my video. I did not mean to leave it off this long. Hi.
Hi, Ms. Nababin.
That's right, Niva.
Oh, thank you. I try to be good with names because clearly mine is also very strange and different. I'm Dr. Basti Acosta, and I'm the Executive Director of Amber Charter Schools. We have a very short presentation that we would like to kind of get through first, and then we'll go to any questions that you may have, and hopefully we'll have answered.
Perfect.
So I think Christine Gainey, who is our Chief Communications Officer, is going to do the presentation. I don't know how they're going to share the PowerPoint.
Yeah, Debbie, can I just hit share and then I can share my screen? I haven't done WebEx.
I think so. This committee has not, and I have not been on WebEx before. We're typically on
Anybody
Zoom.
can share their screen whenever they want to.
Yeah.
Thank you,
So
Jim.
just try it. It should work. And if it doesn't, who knows?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so as she shares the screen, you will meet Ana Vargas, who's the founding principal of Amber Inwood. You will meet Veronica Medina, who is the Chief Schools Officer, and we will be the ones presenting tonight.
Well, thank you so much for all being here. Ooh, it's working.
Okay. All right, we'll get started. Good evening, and thank you, members of the Traffic and Transportation Committee, for giving Amber the opportunity to present today. As Dr. Basti mentioned, my name is Veronica Almedina. I'm the Chief Schools Officer at Amber Charter Schools. And today we are really excited to really share with you all how we look forward to being part of the Inwood community. Alongside me as panelists and as presenters today, you have our founding principal, Ms. Ana Vargas. You have our Chief Communications Officer, Ms. Christine Gainey, and of course, Dr. Basti Acosta, our Executive Director. We're going to proceed on to the and definitely, as Dr. Basti mentioned, take your questions at the conclusion of the session. So a little bit about myself. We'll go to that slide. I've been with Amber for 13 years. It is my home, away from home, and definitely started my career there as an elementary school teacher in 4th grade. I served as an administrator at the East Harlem location, both as a dean of students and assistant principal. And then I was the founding principal of Amber Washington Heights 4 years ago. We were truly excited to open and replicate our second school and come to Washington Heights. And I'll share with you in the upcoming slides why that truly was a dream come true for us. But nevertheless, the facility on 187th Street didn't lend itself for us to grow to a K-5 school. And so we found our permanent home in Kingsbridge, which is not too far away. And there we serve our students in a K-5 setting. And so now I'll go on to the next slide to talk a little bit about our history. So Amber Charter Schools was founded 20 years ago. It is the first Latino-led charter school in New York State. And we were founded by a nonprofit organization known as ACEDP, which is the Community Association of Progressive Dominicans. ACEDP was founded in 1979, and since then has truly been a nonprofit organization that's provided high quality programs to over 27,000 families in the Washington Heights community. Our schools are located both, as I mentioned earlier, in Kingsbridge and in East Harlem. And in the fall of 2017, we did move into our temporary space in Washington Heights. And given that our founding organization had deep-seated roots in Washington Heights, it really brought us joy to replicate and go back to the community that actually opened up Amber. And so with that being said, for us to be able to say now in September 2021 that we're coming back to Washington Heights brings us joy, brings us excitement, and we're eager and enthusiastic about this. In these 100 students in grades K to 5, and that's a picture of our building that's located on 106th Street. And in Kingsbridge, we serve over 475 students in kindergarten to 5th grade. So a little bit about Amber and our mission. Definitely Amber has not only produces strong academic performance, but more broadly, it really addresses the learning and developmental needs of the whole child through enrichment offerings, which Ms. Ana Vargas will share with you shortly, and through a comprehensive range of supports. Overall, we truly take pride in ensuring that our Amber Stars, as we refer them to, ensure they get a rigorous and comprehensive core academic experience. We support students in multiple ways, and you'll learn more about that in the upcoming slides. We truly create an educational community that celebrates culture, which is truly at the forefront during these trying times, and foster a love for learning. We provide clear pathways to middle school, high school, and college. And there you could just see some pictures of our students enjoying music class along our music teacher and truly enjoying this experience of loving to learn and loving to come to school. And now I'm going to turn it over to our Executive Director, Dr. Vasti. Dr. Vasti?
So I'm not going to read what's there. That kind of gives my history. I'm just going to jump to the last line to introduce myself. I was born and raised in Washington Heights. My father has pastored a church on 179th Street and Audubon Avenue for over 60 years. I taught at PS 115. I even attended a PS 115 as a child, and then I showed up and I was a teacher in my own school. I've also been a leader at PS 210, and together with my husband, we were community activists in Washington Heights. My husband was a member of the school board when we had school boards, and he also was a member of the community planning board. I also live in Inwood. I actually live on Park Terrace East. So everything that's going to happen is going to impact me directly. And therefore, I have a special interest in making sure that my school is a good neighbor. Christine.
Okay. Can you hear me? Good evening. My name is Christine Gainey. I started at Amber over 15 years ago as a second grade teacher and team leader in East Harlem. Then I attended with Veronica an Emerging Leaders program and joined Amber's leadership team as a staff developer. I'm now in my 5th year serving as Amber's Chief Communications Officer and looking forward to opening Amber 3 in Inwood. And I will turn it over to Miss Anna.
Good evening, everyone. First and foremost, thank you so much. Christine, if you could just go over to my slide. Thank you. First and foremost, again, thank you so much for welcoming us this evening and providing us with this opportunity to address all of you and allow you to learn a little bit more about us. I was born and raised in Washington Heights, as you can see on that very first line, and I am a product of District 6 schools. I did not attend PS 115 because some rezoning occurred years after. I actually attended PS 173 in the neighborhood, and then later on, I attended Mott Hall, which some of you may or may not recognize the name. I have nearly 2 decades of not just teaching and leading experience, but I have founded approximately 4 different schools and programs across New York City. I've also been a graduate school professor, which comes in incredibly handy when I'm working to develop teachers at varying levels of experience. But my great pride in opening up our school in Inwood comes from providing families with choice, especially because growing up, growing up in District 6 schools, I often wondered, about which other opportunities or what my life would have been like had I not been afforded the choices that I was. And so I see the opening of our school as an integral part of providing the absolute best for our community. Next slide, please. So for those of you who do not know or are not as familiar with where the school building will be, this is our exact location. And during the opening year, which is the coming fall of 2021, we are slated to open with grades K and 1. The building will also serve as an incubator for our Kingsbridge campus middle schoolers, which will bring on board about an additional 200 students in grades 5 and 6. So our very first year, we will have approximately 400 students in the building.
It's okay. You can't hear me.
Moving forward, however, we are slated to grow the school 1 grade per year until we are full capacity, K through 8, with K to 8 students. Next slide, please. So if you're curious about what our students are doing throughout the...
No, we're not curious.
Sorry? At our school, we focus on academic rigor and enrichment, which means that our students have the opportunity to both shine as scholars, but also deepen their interest in other areas. So 90 minutes of their day each day is centered around literacy and math. And we also offer science and social studies content 90 minutes per week. Our students apply their understanding following a station learning approach, and to maintain the cultural wealth that many of our students bring with them, we offer Spanish classes to all of our learners. Additional classes for enrichment are also music, art, movement, and technology to ensure that our students are receiving the support that they need. We also provide them with SETS classes, Title I in reading, tutoring, and English as a new language for students who are still acquiring English. Next slide, please. And so on this slide, you will see just a few images of our students across our other 2 schools. So indulge me as I showcase what it is that we do. In the very first image, we have our students playing their xylophones in music class, some of them in their after-school program, in the ballet program. We have our triumphant winners at the end of their spelling bee. Our council members are in that last image on the upper right. In the bottom left, some of our students showing some class pride and posing for an image, some hands-on science, a celebration at the end of a writing task, and then of course our basketball team to showcase some of the sports that we offer. However, if we could go to the next slide. We couldn't do any of this work without the support of the community. And so we have partnerships across both of our schools, which assist us with everything from the after-school programming to mental health services to the swim classes that we offer our students. And each year we search for new opportunities to further enrich the experience and just the lives overall of our Amber Stars. Veronica is going to talk through some additional ways in which we partner with the community.
Thank you, Ms. Anna. So as Ms. Anna mentioned, we pride ourselves in community, and that is one of the Amber traits. So what we do is definitely celebrate being part of the community and teaching our Amber Stars how to give back to the community. This past Tuesday, we celebrated Giving Tuesday and really had our Amber Stars showcase ways that they're giving back to the community during these trying times. Not only did they create amazing artwork, but they also showcases some important messages and affirmations to those within their community. Here you're going to see some pictures of our 4th graders. They are the student our community service trailblazers, and they take the lead in teaching the Amber Stars the importance of giving back to the community as community members. With that being said, we are excited to partner, as Ms. Anna mentioned, with the Inwood and Washington Heights community and look forward to having our Amber Stars not only be a part, but to give back to the community as well. I'm going to turn it over now back to Dr. Basti Acosta.
Next slide. And so we know that this is the Traffic and Transportation Committee, so this is what you're really concerned about. So just a few points that we want to share with you. One of them is that we're going to give priority to community residents that live in our student lottery. That is what we do in all of our schools to make sure that priority is given when our student lottery and our children are selected. We've decided not to have busing because we know that the streets are very narrow, and therefore to add busing would create even more congestion. We are planning a staggered drop-off schedule as well as a staggered pickup schedule. And we're encouraging families to use public transportation as well as staff, encouraging them to use public transportation. We won't be using the turnaround or the cul-de-sac at all, and we will be directing traffic not to go into that cul-de-sac or the turnaround. Most of our middle schools travel independently in New York City, so we don't anticipate traffic from them. But once we do have accepted our families and once we have registered the students, that will happen in late April or early May, we will survey families in order to understand how they plan to travel to the school. We can also support the community if they choose to advocate for a four-way traffic stop at the corner of 215th Street and Park Terrace West as a way of being able to help with the traffic. There are two moments of the day. We have managed drop-off and pickup in other locations. We know how to do it, and we have been successful in them as well to try to do it as quickly as possible. And, we are willing to work with the community. We want to be good neighbors and be able to offer a wonderful education to all community residents and through our school. Thank you for your time, and now we can open to questions.
Thank you, Dr. Basti and the team for the presentation. I think I'm just going to ask two specific school clarification or like specific data questions, and then I think we'll move on to Dave Tom, and then we'll come back for the broader questions that have to do with streets. But just what's the projected, what's the split between K through 5 versus the middle school 6 through 8, like when you're all in?
When we're right now, we'll be incubating our Kingsbridge Middle School. So the Inwood school is going to start K to 1, and then every year it will grow into its K to 8.
Right, but I guess what I'm saying, when you get there, the split of what's the census of 6 through 8 versus what's the number of kids that you anticipate 6 through 8 versus K through 5?
We anticipate at fully enrolled, we anticipate we might be close to 900 students. 800 and change is what we're looking at.
Okay, so like 3/9, so 1/3 of that being the middle school. That's a number I'm trying to get to.
You're trying to get to the middle school number?
Yeah.
It would be probably more than 1/3. Definitely more than 1/3.
Okay.
I don't have those numbers right in front of me, but I can get them to you. We obviously don't have them in front of me.
And then sort of similar question is, because I imagine some of the kids at Kingsbridge are Inwood or Northern Washington Heights kids. Do you have a sense of like how much of the census will be like walking distance kids versus arriving by public transportation, or not really? I know that's a hard one.
Right. We would have to first accept the students, then know where they're at.
Right.
We don't. Yeah.
Okay. So
in,
just gonna
in our
ask-
interest, if I may, in our interest, right, it would benefit all of us if local children who are interested in a middle school or an elementary school, send them to Inwood because they're within walking distance, and then we wouldn't necessarily have the issue of the additional traffic.
Right. No, fair enough. All right. So I'm going to invite Dave Tom from Inwood Owners to just take us for just a couple of minutes on some of the work he's done about, the immediate streets.
Okay, can you hear me all right? Can everyone hear me? Okay, and can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. So, yeah, my name is Dave Tom, and some of you know me from other items in the neighborhood. I live on West 217th Street, and on behalf of Inwood Owners Coalition, we've had a couple opportunities to talk with Amber, and it was great to hear about their plans for the building that was formerly occupied by Northeastern Academy. There's a few things I'm just going to very quickly walk through for context, because for those of you not familiar with the area, I just want to show some of the specific issues that we have to deal with in this neighborhood, and I'll be very quick. If I can get this to work. Okay, so we're talking about the area, the building that was formerly Northeastern Academy, that's right next to Isham Park on West 215th Street. That's in the very tight hilly section of Park Terrace, and this is a strange part of town because it is the former estates of the Ishams and the Siemens and the Dykmans, and it's not really on the Manhattan street grid. So from the old estates, there were some streets that were eventually carved out, and that's why we have a bit of a disconnected hilly setup with very narrow streets that don't really do well with a lot of traffic. And of course, this property is well known as the former Hearst House, which was the mansion on the corner that then later became a convent in 1929, and then it was demolished, or the adjacent property, the original 532 West 215th, was demolished to build the school building that's there today in 1949, that then had a fifth floor expanded in 1965. And then the corner house today is abandoned. It's not part of Amber's property. It's been master leased by a real estate developer who intends to subdivide the lot, which indicates likely redevelopment. But it's there on the corner today. And in the neighborhood, obviously lots of people, lots of houses, apartment buildings, but the real issue is the streets. So when talking about the streets, anyone who's ever driven around here knows very well that a single vehicle can sometimes block traffic, and whether it's a garbage truck, oil delivery, Time Warner, whoever. So it's quite tricky at the best of times to navigate the loop. And in a school situation, you often have parents who are, don't have the time to sit 5 minutes behind the garbage truck. The particular corner is a very strange corner. You have the step street at 215 and Park Terrace. There's no way to actually cross this street as a pedestrian coming up the stairs without stepping into moving traffic. There's no stop sign here. So a car does not need to slow down or stop in any way. They simply come down Park Terrace. We are in the slow zone, so hopefully they're not moving that quickly, but they often come down at 20 miles an hour, 25 miles an hour, and just make an immediate turn. And for someone to cross from the steps, the only way to do it without crossing moving traffic, in theory, would be to walk west to the stub over by Isham Park. So that's a bit of an issue here. You'd have to go all the way around the Isham Park cul-de-sac if you didn't want to theoretically cross the street. And so for an elementary school population, that's a tough crossing. The other tough crossing is when you go down the hill, traffic doesn't stop on 215 as it goes down across Park Terrace. And again, you can't cross as a pedestrian at all on Park Terrace, across West 215th Street without crossing moving traffic. And then at Isham Park, we have the cul-de-sac and the drop-off area around the park, which is used as a informal parking area at the best of times, but would obviously be a a bit of an attractant for parents waiting to idle cars. So the questions to the committee tonight are really, what is the plan for the existing school parking zone on West 215th Street that's already there at the school? Are there any changes planned to that street? How does redevelopment of former Hearst House play into the traffic expectations for the complex? Has there been any disclosure by the developer as to their plans to partition the site and redevelop it? And by definition, 2/3 of the middle school students will be coming from the two other campuses. Kingsbridge definitely has some good transit options. My son is in the 7th grade and he goes to, my older son goes down to CSS, takes the subway. So sure, middle school students will travel independently, but East Harlem is quite challenging to get to and from Inwood. So, in terms of independent travel, what's really realistic to expect? And so for the committee, can the committee support a resolution asking DOT to study the stop signs, speed humps, etc., especially at those two corners now, rather than wait 2 years to improve the safety of pedestrians, i.e. wait for the school to open, experience a year of problems, experience a year of developing solutions? It's pretty clear what will happen there. And then finally, the experience with local schools suggests that all the best intentions in the world are maybe not enough when it comes to that parental need to drive to the front door of a school. And the committee will remember the experiences with PSMS 278 and PS 18, where my other son goes to school, and where 219th and 220th streets, over a long period of time, we were able to convert those streets to one way to better manage the traffic. The problem here is that that trick was already played. 215th was long ago converted to one way. Amber is also larger at the 923 students on their charter application than those two schools combined. So it's a very large population. So if there are problems, when there are problems, what is the mechanism for reporting those, resolving them? How do we avoid 3-4 years of back and forth with committees and DOT and everything when there's such an obvious issue that is before us? Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Dave. Okay. Sorry, I just want to give it a minute to repopulate so I can see the participant list. Okay.
I have some questions. I don't know when it's approved.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. So that was Jay. Do you want to start the committee off?
Just some background. I believe this is the same location where the good folks of Inwood objected to Luperone High School locating 20 years ago. If I'm not mistaken, I don't know whether, and there was a big outcry and complaints that property values would be destroyed by having a public high school located there. I don't know if those same objections exist among the same people who are still in Inwood or not. And I don't know if they should exactly be a factor in our considerations, but I did want that history to be brought out to the committee. Now, the other question I have for the Amber Charter School is simply because I believe the last charter school that the board as a whole voted on pulled a fast one on us and didn't explain that 5 businesses employing many local residents were located in the building which they wish to occupy. So only because of that, I'm asking this question. I probably should have paid attention beforehand. But
okay.
Is that building occupied at present? Are people being gainfully employed there?
Jay, let me just jump in because I don't think this is On the first point, you've heard the total of public testimony that exists to date, and we're going to hear more from the public. So in terms of what might have happened in the past, that's not what's happening here as far as we know, but somebody may pop up and say something right now. The second thing is, there will not be, the community board has no role. Nobody is approving Amber, or we do not need to resolve. And I will say that what you described was in the context of a BSA, and we can have a discussion about that offline about what that includes and looks like and what it doesn't look at. We asked Amber here because, because we have seen when things go wrong with a school that's not that census doesn't match what the streets can support. And so they are here to answer questions to the best of the ability, but there's no BSA, there's no board action that's required. So they, what I'm saying, there's not a formal thing. We wanted to ask some questions, and they have made themselves available to come to the committee so we can understand better what might be the street's impact. So I'm sorry, just going through in the committee, anybody else? Mariella?
Hi, I just wanted to thank Amber for coming. Christine and I have been going back and forth. And I also am an educator, and so I think it's exciting to have a school, in our immediate neighborhood. I wanted to ask, and I know that you don't have your students yet, but can you explain a little bit more about the staggered entrance and the staggered dismissal, and what staff you'll have to supervise that? Where do you anticipate putting your people to manage safety during those two times? You're muted.
Thank you. The eternal question, right, these days. What we've done in the past is that we have a staggered schedule for different grades, and so they arrive at different times of the morning. We always have staff situated right in front of the entrances where the children are accepted. We anticipate, and we have already asked for crossing guards to be assigned to the 215 at the top of the hill and at the bottom, 215 at Park Terrace East and 215 at Park Terrace West. We do anticipate that we will have families walking up the hill and walking in through those entrances. We, until we have the number of children and where they're coming from, that will, and the travel, that way that they're going to be traveling, that will inform a more detailed plan. Until we have that information, we can't come with a more detailed plan. I'm sharing what we already do in our building. We always have staff at each one of the entrances, and we always ask for crossing guard to make sure that there is safety in any crossing.
Can I just ask a follow-up? I guess I'm asking staggered, 7:10, 7:15, 7:20, or 7:15, 7:30, 7:45. With large numbers of students, staggered is different, whether it's a 5-minute increment or a 15-minute increment.
I'm sorry, but I lost connection for a minute, so all I heard was 15 minutes. Sorry.
Sorry. No, I was saying, I'm wondering, what are those increments when you say staggered? So I have seen schools that say staggered and they mean 5-minute increments, 7:15, 7:20, 7:25, 7:30. Or are we saying 15-minute intervals for students?
Well, here's the other wrinkle in the planning. Where will we be in this pandemic? come September, right? So what we've already been doing is we have been doing 15-minute intervals. Will we need a longer interval to make sure social distancing is in place? So those are some of the unanswerable questions right now that we need to address closer to the time of opening. We might need it to be longer because we want to maintain social distancing because we haven't gotten the vaccine to everyone. Those are just some of the considerations that we're looking at. And those are all new wrinkles that we are looking to accomplish. But right now we would be thinking 15-minute intervals. We're also going to have a different start time for the middle school students compared to the elementary school students. The elementary school students will start earlier in the day than the middle school students. The middle school students will start later in the day, so they won't be all arriving at the same time, as well as a different grade.
Do you expect to have students with disabilities? Is the facility accessible?
It is a very old building. It is accessible for some disabilities, unfortunately not for all.
Can you specify that?
It would not be. It has an elevator, but the elevator does not reach all the floors. And you know, it would not probably be good for you know, I can't, you know, think right now of, you know, specifics, but I know that the elevator doesn't reach all the floors, and therefore the child or the disabled person would not to reach all the floors. We have our East Harlem building is also a very old building, and it's not as accessible as our Kingsbridge building, which is much a newer building, and it obviously is ready and accessible.
Jim Berlin, I think you had your hand up.
I just have a comment. Many of us, I think, have had the opportunity to walk around that section of Inwood and drive around that section of Inwood, and then it's a double-edged sword. On one hand, the building was already a school, so it had some kind of traffic associated with its being a school. I believe it was a high school, so that would probably mean all of the students came there independently. But on the other hand, and I think, you know, Dave Tom makes a very significant point, the streets in that section of Inwood are astoundingly narrow. And what I think we as a committee at some point should call upon the Department of Transportation to do, and it's a twofold thing, not only to measure the capacity, the actual traffic on the streets now, okay, and then see if there are any things that they can improve. But the other piece of it, and this is just sort of maybe aspirational, but one would think, although we have very interesting things going on in 2020, but one would think in 2020, one could actually have software, and again, this is aspirational, that you put in a street map with the widths of all the streets and everything, and it can come up with some reasonable, mathematically calculated capacity for the streets. Now, maybe such software doesn't exist. Maybe it does, and maybe DOT already has it. But I think the other question, insofar as DOT can give us this answer, is what is the theoretical capacity of the streets without the rating of the streets, which are get street, you know, letters like letter grades if the traffic goes too slow, without getting the traffic really slow. So those would be the two pieces of information that would be very helpful for us in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Gerard, I'm sorry, did you have your hand up? And Lyle,
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Did you have a question?
Well, more comment, but similar to what Dave had mentioned, and also Jim was touching base on, people that are familiar with that location and those streets, as Jim spoke and Dave spoke, they are tremendously narrow, and it won't be long before that area has all kinds of congestion and cars and populations that people that live around there are going to have to deal with. At what point could the school consider creating a car-free zone? Maybe where no parents allowed to park, drive up. Maybe everybody has to, maybe from Isham Street or walk up a hill or something like that to keep traffic out of that really closed-in area around the Park Terrace area. Because nothing short of that is going to prevent like the perfect storm of cars and traffic. It's not going to move. Most of us know it's not going to move. We don't even need to study to tell us what's going to happen. So maybe the school could be proactive and create a zone, create a ring that says, parents, we're all environmentalists. Now it's time to actually walk the walk. Walk up from Isham Street, walk up from Seaman Avenue, walk up from Broadway with your child, because otherwise that is a very environmentally unsound plan. Thank you.
Lyle, I'm going to just invite you, I know, to comment in a moment, but one thing that I want you to correct me on if I state this incorrectly about a question and from Dave's presentation is that the DOE spots are no longer, the DOE no longer does those. So if a building has them, they're sort of grandfathered in, but there's no such thing as like teacher parking anymore. And so, but to the extent this building has those spots and those spots remain. So Lyle, correct me if I'm wrong about that. And I guess sort of, if you had any reaction to Jim's points, I would just sort of put a finer point on if you could respond to, like, separate and apart from the school, there is this issue that Dave identified and others have echoed, that there's no crosswalk at the top of the step street. And so, like, if you could sort of respond to that, like, there's some things, potentially a stop sign and certainly a crosswalk, but probably both, that don't really have to do directly with the school. They have to do with a need now.
Well, in regards to say the speed bump request, I guess you can break that individually. DOT can look to see if speed humps are warranted, in this area, independent of whether or not the school, will be in existence. That's a separate issue and apart. We can do it independently of the school being there. In regards to the stop signs, that's a little tricky. We would wait until the school is open in this instance in order to make the determination, because we wouldn't be able to warrant when the stop signs, if stop signs would be necessary there, until we see what the increase in traffic would be once the school is open. So we would have to wait until the school is open to make the determination that we wouldn't be able to get ahead of before the school opening. We might be able to look at it from a different perspective, and it might not be able to meet parameters. It might meet certain parameters before the school, might meet certain parameters after the school. In this instance, it might be better to wait until after the school opens, since we know it's coming, in order to make those determinations to see if the stop signs are feasible. And in regards to the lane marking for the crosswalks, that is something that we can take a look at also in the meantime to see if those are feasible. So there are things that we can do, independent of the school coming in, just to see from a general traffic and safety standpoint, if those are things that are necessary, and we can put the ruling on those.
Sorry, it got a little patchy when you were responding to the issue of the crosswalk. Like, I'm not sure why there's no crosswalk there anyway, but like, what did you say?
No, I would say we could take a look into seeing if a crosswalk is warranted there also. I don't think we'd have to wait until the schools in session in order to take a look at that independently. Like I said, there's some things that we can do independently, prior to the school getting there. The crosswalk can be one of them that we can take a look at.
Okay, so do we need to do anything to get you because I mean, that's a street. A stair street is a street. So I was kind of like that there's not a crosswalk seems strange.
Yeah, I would say if anything, we can treat that as a separate issue independently as of now. I can take a look at that independently of what's going on there, what's upcoming. As far as whether you can do that at the very least.
Okay. Do I have anybody from the board? I know we have a few board members who are not on TNT who had any input before I move to the members of the public. Okay, I'm gonna, Sally, did you have something? I'm gonna just hop to Allegra because I know she's been waiting with a question. Allegra, go ahead.
Hi, thanks, Debbie. So I did have a few questions. I know the DOT says that they haven't studied this quite yet, and yet there are some pretty basic traffic flow models that you can determine the maximum number of cars that can pass through any given section. And if you put a reasonable drop-off time to this section, you only get about 200 cars that can pass through if your drop-off time is something on order 20 seconds, which I think is being pretty reasonable. So I have a question about, do you anticipate there being less than 200 drop-offs per hour? Because that would saturate our streets. My other question is respect to special needs. Like, will you have a full 20% that's representative of Department of Education in general? And for special education children who already live in the neighborhood and have door-to-door busing, how will your impact on traffic prevent them from getting the transportation services that they are required by federal law? So for instance, let's say you cause traffic to slow down and cause an extra 45 minutes of transport time for my child, but she has a 60-minute limited time travel on her IEP. Will you deleteriously impact my child's education by virtue of the additional traffic? And I think we should discuss more these ideas for places that don't have such narrow streets being alternative drop-off locations. I think in the chat box, my neighbor suggested 218th Street. Seaman might be another one, the bottom of Broadway, but other places that don't have these really narrow choke points where it is possible to pass idling vehicles or parked cars or dropping off cars. Thank you.
So I think we will definitely consider all of those other options, as drop-off. We're going to consider them, and we'll see what we can do and how we can manage that. So yeah, those are great ideas, and we welcome them.
Mr. Blackwood, did you want to comment? For our streets, surely the DOT has a better model than this green shell 1935 that I'm using that gave this number that I quoted. Surely you have an estimate for, given a particular drop-off time in seconds, how many cars per hour can fit through a street. This isn't rocket science. It's just like, some sort of 101 statistics for freshmen.
Okay, I can go back and ask if there's anything we can do ahead of time. Like I said, it would be best as the school is coming in to take the determination once we see whether the traffic would increase or not. So,
No, this is not the question I'm asking you. I am asking you specifically, given the speed limit for this area, 20 miles per hour, and given a reasonable range of drop-off times, let's say 10 to 20 seconds, what are the maximum number of vehicles that can pass through this section per hour? It's not rocket science. You don't need a traffic study. You just need a simple model. This will give you something on order 200 to 300, and that's the number I'm looking for from you.
Well, there are also federal guidelines that have to be determined when it comes to a stop sign. It's not just the city model. So there are certain guidelines that have to be adhered to. I don't have the information on me now. Again, I can go back to my colleagues and see if I can get the information. But it's much more than just taking a model and making a guess. Like I said, I can get some information and see if we can do something ahead of time. I don't know if it's doable, considering the current situation.
All right. Allegra, can I just ask you to just monitor the tone? I mean, let's all just be kind to each other. It doesn't need to be so
I'm
berating.
sorry. This is my scientist voice. This is how scientists talk to each other. Should I ask yeses and yeses and like hedge myself like women scientists are want to do? I mean, there's nothing mean about this. This is how I would examine one of my coworkers. So there's no hard feelings here, buds.
I can say that's how scientists talk to one another. Maybe they shouldn't, but they do.
All right. Do I have anybody else? Let me just scan. Okay. So, I think it will say a couple of things. One, thanks again to Inwood Charter for being here and sharing the plans with us. I mean, I think a lot really does hinge on that percentage of kids that are arriving by vehicle versus by on foot or coming off public transportation. So by the time they get to the building, it's on foot. Thank you to Dave Tom for, as usual, having very detailed and complete information about facts on the ground and helping us be as planful as possible. We can't, or, it's not my view that we resolve and act on things that are prospective as much as some people would like us to, meaning we can't request a street change for something that hasn't happened. However, I think that some of the things that have been highlighted here tonight, again, as it relates to the intersections on 215th, at both Park Terrace East and Park Terrace West, but certainly at the top of the stair portion of the street, are things that are situations now. So Lyle, I do hope that we can have a conversation about sort of why it's not there and what it and what we need to do to look at that to see if it can be there. And I guess I would just, ask Amber that as you get more visibility into the census of the school and that split between walking distance and public transportation and vehicle drop-offs, that we always welcome data here, and we'll be pleased to hear about it because, again, as you all know, because it sounds like you're all from the area, and certainly Dr. Busty's from right there, our narrow streets, and this isn't the only place that has them, but they are really narrow up there, cause us all sorts of heartache, and we're all, everybody's trying to get where they need to go. And we see what happens now at 157th and Riverside, when we have narrow streets, and it's certainly something that we need to keep an eye on here because it's, this is a lot of little kids and they're not coming on their own.
Debbie, can I add something?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say, it sounds like there's a lot of the initial planning going on with the logistics. And I would just say, I hope that one possibility is to create some sort of neighborhood committee or coalition or something to help run by some of these ideas. I think it would be a good move to build community trust. And I also think it might help with any blind spots that might happen in moving through the general logistics of a school, given the unique nature of this neighborhood, as from living here. So, I just want to offer myself to be a part of this committee. I've lived on Park Terrace East for 15 years. I've also been a principal for 14 years, to help go through some of these pieces, just to help with some of the possible challenges that you'll see.
Mariela, I thank you very much for that offer. We will take you up on it for sure.
And Mariella, I'm just going to say ditto. Thank goodness. I really appreciate your initiative on this and then offering that. All right. So with that, I actually, since we already did updates and new business and old business, I would like to motion to adjourn this meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Gerard. All right. Thank you, everybody. I think I'll see everybody from Community Board quite soon at our general meeting. Please, everybody, stay safe and healthy. And, wishing those of you that I don't see next week happy and healthy holidays and a better 2021. All right.
Thanks for the opportunity. Bye, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye. Hi, bye, Maria.